Paul says, "I do not cease to give thanks for you." What a wonderful way to be, what a great attitude to have in life, always giving thanks. Paul is writing to the church at Ephesus, and there was plenty to bring Paul down and plenty for the church community to complain about. But Paul says, "I do not cease to give thanks for you, and I pray that you may know hope with the eyes of your heart enlightened." That phrase has been rolling around in my head this week. It's such a great phrase, with the eyes of your heart enlightened. A sense of our hearts being awake and alive and being able to see as well as feel. So not just kind of being enlightened in our minds, but being enlightened in our hearts. So we come together today giving thanks and seeing anew with our hearts. As Kate said at the beginning of the service, we are here for many different reasons today. Some of you are here in particular because a loved one has died in the last year and maybe their funeral was here. Some of you are here to hear the choir sing, which is a jolly good reason. Some of you are here because you're always here. Some of you are here perhaps because you've wandered in by chance. And so we give thanks for each other and for all those reasons for being here. We give thanks too for the people whose names will be read during the prayers, or whose people's names we're remembering in our hearts as we go through the service. There are names on the list of people who died very recently, others long ago. Some old, some young, some in between. For some of us, the grief might be so recent and so fresh that it's kind of hard to breathe. For others, the tears might flow again, but more softly. Each life that we remember, whether short or long, is complete in itself. And in the midst of our sadness and grief, we can still be thankful. That's partly what Jesus meant when he said, "Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh." So wherever you are and you're grieving and you're loving and you're giving thanks, you can allow the words of the Requiem and the singers to speak for you. Whatever it is you want to say to your loved one or to God or to yourself. Words of thanks, sure, but there might also be words of anger, words of regret, words of sorrow, also words of love and words of joy. Tears and smiles, goodbyes and hellos. Let the music carry you and your thoughts. But then let me warn you that the words of Jesus that we've just heard from the Gospel reading might come crashing in and might not seem quite resonant with your personal prayers and Paul's beautiful words of thanksgiving. Because Jesus is like that. He gets in the way of our own plans and thoughts. I said just now that in the midst of sadness and grief we can still be thankful, and that's partly what Jesus meant when he said, "Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh." But the Beatitudes, as this list of blessings is called, isn't really about us as individuals. We often hear them that way, but they're actually to us as a community. Jesus, we are told, went up a mountain to pray, and then in Luke's version, he comes down to a level place with a great crowd of the disciples and a great multitude of people. And he looks at the disciples, he's particularly talking to them. He says, "Blessed are you who are hungry. Blessed are you who weep. Blessed are you when people hate you." They're not descriptions of individual struggles, but the life of the early followers of Jesus who were hungry for God, who were weeping at the state of their lives and their communities, weeping at the way they were oppressed and hated by the Romans. Jesus' words are a commentary on their community and their way of life. And by the time Luke records these words, the early church was definitely struggling and asking the question, well, what has changed? Here we are following Jesus, but people are still hungry. We still weep for our world, and the Romans are still ruling. They're still taking our coats and all our possessions, taking what we own. What has changed? And then don't even start with love our enemies. How on earth are we supposed to do that? One writer, Mark Lau-Branson, puts it like this. He says the perspective being voiced here is not that poverty is good or that weeping is to be sought, but that a community that lives with these characteristics, weeping and worrying about the hungry, the community that lives with these characteristics in vulnerability and receptivity to the presence of God's reign, they will find themselves embraced and reconciled and comforted and even recreated. Jesus wants them to have new eyes, different perspectives, and awareness of God's generative work amongst them. So it's about perspective and the way we see things. Sam Wells says it like this. He calls it a window into the heart of God that can be seen by those who experience adversity, but that is invisible to the comfortable. So like the eyes of the heart that Paul writes about, if the eyes of our heart become more open or more enlightened by our life experiences, then we can see, maybe, even into the heart of God. But then after the list of blessing, Jesus ramps it up again with the woes or curses. Woe to the rich, the full, the laughing, those who are praised. Again, not so much woe to us as individuals, but woe to the society who ignored the needs of others and who carry on in their own self-satisfied way. These words of Jesus are about life here and now and in every generation, life with all its questions and lack of answers. Who are the blessed and who are the lost? Blessed are the hungry, those who literally are hungry and who will eat today next door at the City Mission. Blessed are the hungry who will be fed today from this table. We are hungry for our ritual bread and wine, which represents to us life with God, life in community. Blessed are we who hunger for God in our lives, even if we're not sure who God is or how that might work, how we might meet God, we hunger for God nonetheless. Blessed are the hungry who seek, who look, who want to know God, and who want to feed the hunger of our world with love and service. Woe to us, though, if we think we have life figured out. Woe to us if we are self-satisfied and sure that we know everything. Woe to us if we neglect the hungry at our door. Nonetheless, we are invited to be here today. We are invited to let the words of the Requiem wash over us. We are invited to let the words weep for us, and we're lifted up by their beauty. Nonetheless, we're invited to be here today, hearts and hands empty, hungry, ready to be touched by God's grace, ready to be touched by God's grace in the Eucharist, ready to give thanks, ready to have the eyes of our hearts enlightened.